They say that hitchhiking is a dying practice, a relic of a bygone era when people trusted strangers with their lives. But sometimes, in moments of desperation, even the most cautious souls find themselves thumbing a ride from an unknown driver. It's a decision born of necessity, but one that can lead straight into the heart of terror. Tonight, we'll venture into the eerie world of hitchhiking horror, where a simple act of getting into a car becomes a journey to hell, especially because these stories are based on true events. These people don't know it yet, but they just crossed the line into the realm of Mr. Scary Guy. Prepare yourself for a journey beyond the ordinary, into the shadows of your deepest fears. Welcome to the world of Mr. Scary Guy. It was supposed to be the perfect night. Emily and I had just left this incredible concert. You know, the kind that leaves your ears ringing, but in a good way? We were both 18, fresh out of high school, and that night we felt like we were on top of the world. The drive home was supposed to be the easy part, just a couple of hours down a quiet country road back to our small town. But then, out of nowhere, my car started acting up. The engine sputtered, and before I could pull over, it died completely. I cursed under my breath as I eased the car to the side of the road. We were stuck. Middle of nowhere, no cell service. Just me, Emily, and miles of dark, empty road stretching out in both directions. Emily tried to stay calm, but I could see the fear creeping in.
Maybe we should walk back to the gas station we passed a while ago,
she suggested. That's miles back, I told her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Let's just wait a bit, someone's bound to come by. An hour passed. Silence. Not even a car in sight. Just the dark woods surrounding us, pressing in. Then finally headlights appeared in the distance, a faint glow slowly getting brighter. I jumped out of the car and started waving my arms, desperate to flag down whoever was driving. A big truck pulled over. The guy driving looked friendly enough, middle-aged, with a big smile plastered across his face.
"You kids need a ride?"
he asked. Emily looked at me with uncertainty, but we didn't have a lot of options. Yeah, our car broke down. Think you can drop us off in the next town? I asked, trying to sound casual.
"Sure thing,"
the driver said.
"Hop in."
We climbed into the cab. I sat up front while Emily slid into the back. The driver introduced himself as Earl, and he seemed like a decent guy, making small talk about the concert and how these roads can be tricky at night. For a while it was fine, but after about 15 minutes, something felt off. Earl stopped talking. The radio buzzed with static, and the only sounds left were the rain tapping on the windshield and the low hum of the engine. Earl's smile faded and his grip on the steering wheel tightened. We turned off the main road onto a narrow, winding path that didn't look familiar. Earl? Is this the right way? I asked, trying to keep the unease out of my voice.
"Shortcut,"
he mumbled, eyes fixed dead ahead. Emily leaned forward from the back seat.
Jason, I don't like this,
she whispered. Her hand clutched my shoulder and I could feel her fear. I don't like it either, I muttered back. I turned to Earl again. Actually, could you just let us out here? I asked. We'll walk the rest of the way. And that's when it happened. Earl's whole face twisted, his eyes darkened, and his voice wasn't human anymore.
"You're not going anywhere,"
he growled. I froze. The sound of the truck doors locking echoed through the cab. I grabbed the handle and yanked at it, but it was no use. We were trapped. Emily screamed and the truck swerved violently. Earl was laughing now, this sick, guttural sound that made my stomach churn. The truck barreled down the road faster and faster, the trees outside blurring into a wall of black. Then, out of nowhere, the truck screeched to a stop. Earl turned his head toward me, his eyes glowing a deep, unnatural red.
"You should have stayed in your car,"
he snarled and lunged at me. I don't know how, but I fought back. In the chaos, Emily managed to unlock the door and we both tumbled out onto the wet, muddy road. We didn't stop. We ran. We ran as fast as we could, the sound of Earl's maniacal laughter ringing in our ears. Behind us, the truck roared to life again, its headlights bearing down on us. We kept running, our shoes slipping on the slick asphalt. Just as the truck was about to reach us, it suddenly veered off the road and slammed into a tree with a sickening crunch. We stopped, panting, staring at the wreck. Flames licked up from the hood, but Earl was gone. The cab was empty. We didn't stick around to find out more. We ran until we found help in the next town. But no matter how far we got from that night, the terror never left us. Sometimes on dark roads, I swear I still see headlights in the distance creeping closer. I thought I'd seen it all. War zones, close calls, losing friends, you name it. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. I'd just gotten back from my final tour, ready to surprise my family. No one knew I was coming home that day, and I figured what better way to do it than hitchhike like I used to. Seemed like a good idea at the time. It was early, still dark out, and I was walking along this empty highway. My duffel bag weighed heavy on my shoulder, the mist hanging low over the road. A car finally slowed down, an old beat-up sedan, the kind that looks like it could die at any moment. The driver, a guy in his late 40s, rolled down the window.
"Need a lift, soldier?"
he asked. Something in his voice was off, but I shrugged it off. "Yeah, thanks. Just trying to get home," I said, figuring he was just another old vet.
"Hop in,"
he said with a crooked smile. I threw my bag in the back and slid into the passenger seat. For a while, it was just the hum of the road beneath us. I wasn't much for small talk, but the silence started to get to me. I glanced at the guy. His uniform was too clean, too pristine, and there was something hollow in his eyes. "You in the service?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. He chuckled, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that makes you feel at ease.
"Used to be. Long time ago."
"Army?" I asked, though a knot was already forming in my gut.
"Same as you,"
he said, his smile widening. That's when the chill hit me. I hadn't told him I was in the Army. Hell, I hadn't told him anything about me. "How'd you know that?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. The smile didn't leave his face.
"I know a lot of things about you, David."
My blood ran cold. I hadn't said my name. I turned in my seat, suddenly hyper-aware of everything around me. The hum of the tires, the weight of my duffel in the back seat, the stench of wet leather. "Who are you?" I demanded, my hand inching toward the door handle. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and looked at me, really looked at me, and my heart damn near stopped. I knew that face. It was impossible, but I knew it. It was a guy I'd served with. He died on our first tour. I'd seen him go down. I was at his funeral.
"You left me,"
he whispered, his voice cracking, echoing with the sounds of gunfire and screams.
"You left us."
The car sped up and I yanked at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. His laughter filled the cab, a twisted, haunting sound.
"You think you can walk away? You think you can forget?"
My hands were shaking now. This couldn't be happening. It was all in my head. It had to be. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block it out, but his voice, it was everywhere, like it was crawling inside my skull.
"Look at me,"
he roared. I opened my eyes, and what I saw wasn't human anymore. His face, his whole body had twisted into something dark, something monstrous. His eyes glowed this sick yellow, and his skin was warped, like it had been melted by fire.
"You're coming with me,"
he hissed, his hand reaching out toward me, his fingers sharp like claws. I fought, kicking, pushing him away, but it was like fighting a nightmare. The car swerved, and I heard the sound of metal crunching as we veered off the road. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the side of the highway. The sun was rising, and the car, it was gone. Just like that. Vanished. But I knew what had happened. I could still feel it, the way the air around me felt heavy, like something was watching, waiting. I didn't go home that day. Instead, I wandered for hours until I found myself in some tiny town, miles from where I'd been picked up. I never talked about it, not to anyone, but I can't shake the feeling that I didn't come out of that car alone. Sometimes late at night I hear that voice again, the one that reminds me of what I've been trying to forget. I used to think I was a good judge of character. You spend enough time driving around late at night, you get to know people pretty well. Or at least, I thought I did. But then I picked up that hitchhiker, and everything I thought I knew about the world turned upside down. It was a Friday night, late enough that the highway was practically deserted. I was heading home after a long week on the road, making deliveries across state lines. Trucking's a lonely job, but I've always liked the solitude. Just me, my rig, and the hum of the engine to keep me company. It was raining hard that night, the kind of rain that makes the windshield wipers work overtime and the road disappear under sheets of water. I didn't mind though, I was almost home, maybe another hour or two. That's when I saw him. Standing on the side of the road, thumb out like it was the most normal thing in the world. Now, I'm no stranger to hitchhikers. Most of them are just folks looking for a ride to the next town. I've picked up my fair share over the years, never had a problem. But something about this guy, I don't know. Maybe it was the way he stood or the fact that he wasn't trying very hard to get my attention. He just stood there almost like he knew I'd stop. And I did. I don't know why. I guess I felt sorry for the guy standing out in the pouring rain in the middle of nowhere. I pulled over and rolled down the window. "Need a lift?" I called out, trying to sound casual, even though something about him was already putting me on edge. The guy stepped up to the passenger side door and opened it. He was young, maybe late 20s, dressed in dark clothes that were soaked through from the rain. He didn't smile, didn't say thank you, just nodded and climbed in. As soon as he shut the door, I felt it. The temperature in the cab seemed to drop about 10 degrees. I cranked up the heat thinking it was just the rain getting to me, but it didn't help. The guy sat there staring straight ahead, not saying a word. His clothes were dripping all over the seat, but he didn't seem to care. "So, where you headed?" I asked, trying to break the ice.
"East,"
he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I frowned. East didn't make a lot of sense. We were already heading west. "You mean west?" I corrected, glancing over at him.
"No,"
he said, turning his head to look at me for the first time. His eyes. There was something wrong with his eyes. They were too dark, like there wasn't any light in them at all.
"I need to go east."
"Right," I said, trying to shake off the weird feeling crawling up my spine. "Well, I'm heading west. Nearest town's about 30 miles. You can grab a ride there?" He didn't say anything, just kept staring at me with those empty eyes. I focused on the road, hoping the conversation was over, but it wasn't. After a few minutes, he spoke again.
"You ever pick up someone you shouldn't have?"
The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" He turned to face me fully now, his face pale, almost gray in the dim light of the cab.
"Some people don't belong on the road,"
he said, his voice flat, emotionless.
"Some people should stay where they came from."
I didn't like where this conversation was going. I'd picked up plenty of strange people before, but this was different. This guy, there was something wrong with him, something I couldn't put my finger on. I cleared my throat, trying to change the subject. "You from around here?" I asked. He didn't answer, just kept staring at me with those dead eyes. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't know what was going on, but I wanted him out of my truck. "Now, we're coming up on a rest stop," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll drop you off there. Should be someone around who can help you get where you're going." He didn't say anything, just kept staring at me, his eyes boring into me like he could see straight through me. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Something was very wrong. As we approached the rest stop, the rain started coming down harder, the windshield wipers barely keeping up. The headlights illuminated the small, empty lot up ahead, the kind of place where truckers stop to take a break. stretch their legs. But tonight, it was deserted. No cars, no lights, just the rain and the dark. I pulled into the lot and stopped the truck. "All right, this is your stop," I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. "You can find someone here to help you out." He didn't move, didn't even blink. I reached over to unlock the door, but my hand froze halfway there.
You're not going anywhere.
He said, his voice so low I almost didn't hear it. But I did. And when I looked at him, really looked at him, I felt my blood turn to ice. His face wasn't human anymore. It was like his skin had stretched too tight over his skull, his mouth too wide, his eyes hollow, black, empty. I yanked my hand back and slammed the truck into gear, the tires screeching as I floored it out of the lot. My heart was pounding in my chest, adrenaline surging through my veins. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just drove, pushing the truck faster and faster, trying to get away from whatever the hell was sitting next to me. But it didn't work. He was still there. I could feel him, even though I couldn't bring myself to look. His presence filled the cab, a cold, suffocating weight pressing down on me.
You can't outrun it.
He said, his voice echoing in my head.
You can't run from what's coming.
I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop in the middle of the highway. My breath came in ragged gasps as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. When I finally looked over, the passenger seat was empty. He was gone. Just like that. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the empty seat, my mind racing. Had I imagined it? Was I losing my mind? I don't know how long I stayed there, but eventually, I started driving again. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing at the seat, half expecting him to reappear. But he didn't. Not that night anyway. I never picked up another hitchhiker after that. I couldn't. Every time I saw someone on the side of the road, all I could think about was him. Those empty eyes, that twisted face. And sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I still feel him, sitting there in the passenger seat waiting. So, my dear listeners, the next time you find yourself on a dark, lonely road, remember these stories. You never know who or what might be behind the wheel of that car you're about to get into. And if you're ever tempted to hitch a ride, just ask yourself, is it really worth the risk? This is Mr. Scary Guy saying, good night. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe by clicking the icon above. We've also got a playlist full of scary stories on your left side, and a suggested video you'll love on the right. Choose one and keep the scares going.